What's up, PoE homies? JWar here with another video. So Accuracy Stacker is back. We are using Vengeant Cascade like a lot of other builds that have been going around in the community, but there's a reason for that because it's really strong. And Accuracy Stacker has always been an archetype I've liked, and it works really well with Vengeant Cascades because it's an attack-based build that can use projectile attacks. The two skills that are kind of new to it this league are Frostblades and Molten Strike. Those are taking advantage of Vengeant Cascade. You can still do Lightning Strike, and it's really good. And just to quickly go through the benefits and drawbacks of using each skill, Frostblades has the best clear, Molten Strike has the best single target, and Lightning Strike is somewhere in between the two. So why play Accuracy Stacker? In my opinion, it has one of the best cost to performance ratios in the game, and by that I mean it performs really well at a pretty low cost. Now the gear I have right now is only about 10 to 15 divines worth of gear, and it's at a pretty end game state. It just rolls over everything in T16 maps. You know, the map bosses will die in like a second or two, if that, and then really powerful essence monsters will just get melted, and it's a pretty budget build still. So that's one of the reasons I like Accuracy Stacker so much. That's one of the reasons why I like to put out videos on Accuracy Stacker, because I think it's pretty good for new players for a, you know, cost to performance ratio, as newer players typically don't have a ton of currency to spend on a build, and this gets a lot done for you for a cheap cost. Benchmarking the build. What can you expect performance-wise from the build? Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to go around and farm every end-game boss to make a showcase video on all of the bosses, but I like to benchmark my builds against Simulacrum. As you can see here, we're using Frostblades in a Simulacrum, and it can get to about wave 30. You need Molten Strike single target to do Simulacrums up to wave 30, but it can get to wave 30. I got to wave 30. I did not complete one. I was very close to completing a wave 30 Simulacrum on it, but it can very regularly get to the later waves, 27, 28, 29, 30 of Simulacrum, but it starts to struggle in the later waves. So that's a little bit of an idea of the performance. I think it has about 20 million DPS. Can it do uber bosses? It could probably do them, especially with Molten Strike single target, but I wouldn't take it in there to farm them regularly. That's the kind of performance you'd expect out of the build. And let's get into the gear and how I put it together and all the details of it. Alright guys, so we're going to do two maps here. First map, I'm going to show you guys Frostblades, and then I'm going to show you guys what I prefer to play on the build, and that's Molten Strike. I'm going to do Essence just because my Atlas passive tree is set up to do Essence right now. And I think it's a good indicator of single target damage. Usually the Essence monsters are tankier than the boss. Looks like we're also going to do a Delirium Mirror here. I'm going to activate it. But anyway, as you can see, the build is quite fast, right? Handles those Essence monsters pretty good. That was a Shrieking Essence, a 3-time Shrieking, which are usually pretty tanky. So keep going through here. I'll try not to talk too much so you guys can pay a little more attention to the gameplay. As you can see, we have that, you know, that classic Accuracy Stacker speed with our Whirling Blades getting around the map. So you can see here, pretty good damage, but if I was on Molten Strike there, those would have been dead in like a second. Gotta love the cold dots that last forever so I can't loot. Good old PoE. Anyway, continuing along here, I'm just gonna loot while I'm going. Probably shouldn't be doing that for the video, but hey man, gotta get my loot. So, the damage on Frostblades is pretty good actually. And it's really fun. It's got really good clear. So it's going to keep going through, and that, as I'll probably say multiple times, is the main difference between Molten Strike and Frostblades. Frostblades is also weird with the damage sometimes. Sometimes, like, I swear, for the first half of when I'm like sitting there single target a monster down, like in melee range, it seems like it's not doing that much damage, and then like all of a sudden the damage will just kick in and it'll like melt the second half of its health bar. I'm not exactly sure why it does that. It does seem that Vengeant Cascade is, and I'm getting spammed here, I just lowered the price on that dump tab before I started the video. It's probably not the smartest thing to do, right? But still kind of melts the bosses with Frostblades. And you'll see I'm going a little bit slow here because I'm a little bit distracted trying to explain things about the build. But I should have used a Corruption on this Essence, but it's fine. It has Misery on it, which can turn into one of the higher tier things, but it didn't, right? But you can see it pretty much handles everything on the map real easily, and I'll show you guys my gear at the end of the video, or at some point in the video, to see what I'm working with. But it's really not that crazy projectile speed, and I know because I don't have some Atlas points in the tree, or some passive points in the tree, not Atlas points, that I was not at that breakpoint. So Continuing along here, and you'll notice a big difference. The clear's a little bit slower, but you could really see there those were a little bit tankier. Obviously, the projectiles take a second to land, too, on the Molten Strike, so, you know, you have to factor that in. But the clear is definitely a little bit slower, but there's also a little bit of a playstyle difference you should have with Molten Strike, whereas you, most of the time, didn't really wait for the projectiles to come down and kill stuff. I'm kind of doing it to show the damage here, but you should kind of just attack and move, kind of fire and forget, right? And you kind of assume everything's going to die behind you, because it 9 times out of 10 is anyway. As long as you just get a couple hits off and move, everything's going to die. And then you kind of just look out for your loot filter for those pings if you want to go back and pick something up, right? But that's usually how it works. But you'll notice, especially on the boss and some of these essence monsters, hopefully we don't get like just no good essence monsters this time to show off the single target, but the single target is way better on Molten Strike. I was able to get to wave 30 Simulacrum. See, absolutely melts the boss there. You can see it does take a second for the projectiles to kind of land, but once they do, everything just instantly dies. So here's probably a good essence to show it off on, right? Way faster. That was probably one of the more tanky essences. Hard to tell with Molten Strike because it kills everything so fast. So let's talk about gear for a second. So one of the reasons this build is so nice, I would say, especially for new players, it's very tanky and it does a lot of damage on a very cheap budget. The gear is almost all uniques. You have a unique amulet that's very cheap, like a 2C unique amulet. The rolls can go up to, as you can see, 600 to 1000 accuracy. This one's 999, which I got for, I don't know, like 510C maybe. So you can get very good rolls for cheap. The helmet is kind of the same deal with the accuracy roll, Obscurantis. You are going to want to get your helmet enchanted, which you're probably going to have to pay a lab runner for, which you can do on TFT. Just go to the services section and find a lab runner, ask him how much the helmet's going to be, and you're going to give him the helmet, and he's going to give it back to you in hopefully less than a day with the enchant on it you want. I got this one for, I think, 3 divines, so it wasn't too bad. I should also mention that that's kind of a late game upgrade that you aren't necessarily going to need. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the evasion rating on the chest piece. So you can craft evasion rating, which allows you to use this, which gives us 15 chance to suppress spell damage. So that's a very good use of a point there, but you have to be a little bit clever with the chest, because on this build, because we're Juggernaut and we take this notable, or this ascendancy point rather, armor applies to elemental damage. We want to stack as much armor as we can, so having like a regular armor evasion based chest piece, we would get a lot less armor. I think we could only go up to like maybe 1000 if we hit like really nice rolls on it, maybe 1200, but we want as much as we can get. So that's why, as you notice, my prefixes are a big life roll and a big armor roll, right? And I tried to hit one with an open prefix to craft evasion rating on, which you can't normally hit on a pure armor chest piece. So, and then another big thing about the chest piece is melee hits have chance to fortify. Now this is going to give you basically permanent fortify uptime with both Frostblades and Molten Strike, as long as you're attacking something, and it's going to last about 6 seconds. We don't take any fortify duration to make it last longer. You don't really need it as long as you're attacking something, which you almost always are. Rings and boots, as they are basically our only non-unique items, are very important. So you want to make sure you get accuracy rating rolls as the most important thing. Obviously, you're going to have to factor budget into this. Accuracy rating with high res and high life in an open prefix for non-channeling skills is going to be pretty expensive, but I think I paid for like a divine for these rings. They're not too crazy expensive, but like I said, it's not like gonna make or break the build if you don't get really nice rings, if you just want to get the build started and then build up some currency. And then boots, life and res again on boots with no accuracy rating. I like having the onslaught on kill, so I generally try to get life and res with an open prefix. It's very important to have a lot of res on your rings and boots because you don't really get it anywhere else. Oscarm gloves. Okay, Oscarm gloves. The two most important rolls is try to get the lowest minus chaos rest you can, -10, and the highest increased global accuracy. And then nothing really to mention about the helmet or Hinacor's sight. Obviously, when I anoint Vengeant Cascade. The belt, these jewels can be kind of expensive. Int accuracy rating in life is probably the best thing you can get, as intelligence is a little bit of a problem for us. And me having these jewels with intelligence on it allows me to not have to anoint both of these on the tree. Otherwise, you're going to have to probably anoint at least one if you can't get some intelligence, like on your chest or on anywhere else, right? But there's nowhere else you can get it. You could get it on rings. It would be very nice. You could get it on jewels. You could try to like get it on boots with an essence if you had some free suffixes to use for not needing the resistance. But resistance is kind of hard to cap in the build. That's part of the reason why we use Purity of Elements. in addition to the ailment immunity being really nice with purity of elements. So I think that's basically it for the gear. And then obviously we're using this rolls now 50 100% increased effect of abyss jewels, which is nice, but it's just a darkness and throne. So we basically have 1 2 3 4 5 6 unique items, and what's that, 4 non-unique items for the build. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the PoB. I spent a long time on this PoB. I made a very nice leveling section for you guys. I did this to level this league, so I leveled this as my second character, and I did Accuracy Stacker leveling, which you can start around Act 3. I would recommend doing that. I talk about that here in the leveling guide. You can either just use Sunder if you don't want to have to respec in the middle of the campaign. Some people might not want to do that, but you're going to have to spend a lot of regret orbs to respec into Accuracy Stacker later. If you do that, Sunder is fine to level with, but you'll have a really good time if you swap into early Accuracy Stacker around Act 3. All you really need are Cloud Whisper boots. I go over all of that. I'm not going to read this out on the video, but just make sure you read this carefully. If you're going to do Accuracy Stacker while leveling, it just allows you to not have to respec later, which is nice, and it gives you a really nice experience in the later part of the campaign. Really, you're going to be like flying through Acts 5 through 10. If you go Accuracy Stacker early, it's pretty fun actually. You're just whirling blades around like a fucking maniac, and your Accuracy Stacker just murdering everything. So it's pretty fun if you are doing that. There's a lot of steps to follow, so I would follow everything in these notes for the leveling section. I spent a long time putting it together, so it would be nice if someone got some use out of it if you intend on leveling a Marauder for the build. Just to make things easier for people, I have different gear sets, really just for a few early endgame and a few swaps. Well, actually, early endgame are swap to replica last resorts, swap to claws after first lab, and what you want to do super early on with Sunder. Take a look at that, and the end game is actually my gear, so what you want to go for eventually on the build. I don't have super crazy expensive gear, even with like 1 divine each rings and like 1 divine jewels. I would say the build, if you include the helmet enchant, maybe it's 15 divines, but even with the kind of nice gear I have, it's probably about 10-15 divines for everything. And to put it together for a baseline, the build is probably going to be like 4 divines without all the enchants and nicely rolled gear, right? If you just get like some 20-30C rings and no enchants or anything, it's not gonna be that bad. Like I said, the Transcendent Spirit Jewels are not that expensive. So essentially just follow this. I've got all the different gear sets that you need during the swaps. I've got all the different points you take on the tree at certain times. If you do this right, it's going to feel really smooth and really nice. As you can see with Frostblades, it's telling us we have about 10 million, and that's without the Vengeant Cascade double hit. I don't think Frostblade feels like 20 million DPS. I think Molten Strike definitely does feel like 20 million DPS for a single target. So I've got both of them in here, depending on which one you want to use. Like I said, it's a little bit of a stylistic choice if you want to use Molten Strike or Frostblades. I like Molten Strike better for the single target. If you're going to do bossing, I would do Molten Strike. I don't think this is going to be the best bossing build, but if you do take it in there, I'm sure it could handle it with Molten Strike. Vengeant Cascade, it's pretty strong. Probably doing about 20 million DPS. So, alright, that just a little look at the PoB and how I set everything up for you guys, so you should be pretty good with that. Alright, so let me take a second here and go over the passive tree with you guys. The biggest single upgrade you can get on this build, which is kind of 3 upgrades in one, is getting a Brutal Restraint. Any Brutal Restraint tool, it doesn't matter. I got a really nice one that gives me accuracy rating here and here on the only 2 notables in range of it. You can get anything here, it doesn't really matter. This isn't increasing my damage by a huge amount or anything. It doesn't really matter, just get a Brutal Restraint, which in tandem with these Transcendent Spirit Jewels, which these are about 90C each when I bought them, but I bought them like a week ago, so they're probably like 50C now. They change the nodes that you aren't anointing to have dexterity on them, and then Transcendent Spirit gives you accuracy rating per dexterity on unallocated passive, so you end up getting 1600 accuracy rating on this jewel and another 1600 on this jewel, which is a massive damage increase for the build. So this is very mandatory and should be the first thing you're going for once you get to endgame. And then I'll talk about a couple other big upgrades you can get, because there's not a whole lot else to talk about on the tree. Another jewel you want to get is another Transcendent Spirit here. But the 3 biggest upgrades you can get for the build, in addition to just having a 6 link and all the gear with these 3 jewels, is the second biggest thing you want to do is have a Divergent additional accuracy. This changes the quality to give you increased attack damage per 1000 accuracy rating, and you're going to have upwards of 60-70k accuracy rating on this build. That's giving you what, like 70 times 4, so that's going to be 280% increased attack damage or something like that. So very, very good. And then the last thing is not quite as important, but is a pretty sizable upgrade, if I could find it, is another alternate quality gem, Anomalous Warbanner. Now this makes the Warbanner have additional accuracy for the quality, right? Which is very, very good for the build. It already does give a lot of accuracy anyway, but it's going to give another 20%, I believe. Or maybe just another 10% additional accuracy rating, which is good. So not a major upgrade, but another big upgrade you can get for the build. One more big upgrade I forgot to mention is you should get these claws enchanted. It used to be a little bit easier to do this, but I'll talk about that in 1 second. You should get them enchanted with this craft. It's 5,000 yellow life force each. So it's not crazy expensive, and it's one of the later things you should do to get more damage on the build, but you get, and then eventually you want to get up to 30% quality. You used to be able to do this really easily by corrupting them to 30% quality with beast crafting, but now you kind of don't want to do that because you're going to brick your Crucible Trees and make it a lot harder to put Crucible Trees on them eventually, which is a thing you probably want to do. So you'll probably just Hillock bench them through buying a Hillock bench craft on TFT from somebody for a 30% quality weapon, which is probably going to be like, I don't know, to do that and put this on right now in the league, it's probably like a divine to do both for each claw. So it's like 2 divines to do that for the claws eventually. Like I said, it's not super mandatory, it's not a massive amount of damage, but it will add, I think, like, what, 1% accuracy per 2% quality, so it's going to be 15% additional accuracy per claw, which is 30% additional accuracy, increased accuracy, which is really good, so you want to get that eventually too. Okay, so I guess I'll briefly take a second here to talk about Crucible Trees. This topic probably could go on for a long time, but we'll keep it brief for this video because I don't think the Crucible Trees are extremely important for the build, so to speak, but they can do some, you know, really nice damage upgrades, obviously. Accuracy rating is really good to get. I got lucky and just hit this on the tier 2. Yeah, increased accuracy, flat elemental damage. This one is also really good. Increased attack speed and less global damage. Essentially, that's 10% more damage. 30% increased attack speed based on anything is usually just 30% more damage with 20% less damage. So it's about 10% more damage. Those are all the good ones you can get. And then just obvious other good ones. Another really nice thing you could hit is Iron Reflexes on the build, which would be really nice. We do not have the points to path down to this, unfortunately. Taking 5 points to get to this would just be too much for the build. So if you could get that on a last resort Crucible tree, it would be really good because we have a lot of flat evasion rating on our gear with Obscurantis, a little bit on Oscarm, and a good amount on our Storm Rider boots as well. These probably need to be qualityed, and you could get up to, like, I don't know, 400 or 500 on the boots, 1,000 on the helmet, and another, like, I don't know, 150 on the gloves, maybe 120. That could be really good to turn that into armor because, like I said before, our armor ascendancy point for Juggernaut makes us really tanky, especially to elemental damage and then to physical damage as well, as an armor naturally does. Offensively, just the usual stuff you're looking for on the tree. Flat elemental damage, increased crit chance would be good, increased attack speed, less global damage, one is really good, and then accuracy rating obviously is really good. But alright guys, that's going to do it for the video. I'm sure there are a couple things I probably forgot to mention, but it's always really hard to fit in all the information into these videos and keep them concise. But feel free to stop by the Discord, ask me any questions. You can pop in the stream. I'm going to try to stream every night from now on if I can. We'll see how my schedule works out. But yeah, that's going to do it, and thanks for watching.